أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرج. So today's session, inshallah, it's we'll look at lesson number 17 and look at a review rather than look at both 17 and 18. I was thinking of just looking at 17 and a review. So please ignore this portion. I've corrected that in the slides, but I haven't changed the number here. Um, So we'll be looking at lesson number 17 from the book that you guys have. We'll look at some practice examples for that to see what's going on. Then we're gonna give an overall review of what we've covered so far with myself, and I think this will be the last session with me at least that I'm aware of, which will cover basically level 8, going from lesson number 6 where we started off and lesson number 17 where we're ending. So it was a little bit more fast-paced in terms of going through the content. But alhamdulillah, I felt that you guys had the capacity to keep up. We sped up a little bit in the beginning. We did about 3 lessons in one session. And then some of the classmates said that it's better to have the sessions slightly slower. So we went back down to 2 units per session and felt that the homework was being done. I asked some review questions in the beginning and encouraged you to go back to your notes. Hopefully you continue doing that throughout because we stopped the initial review questions, hoping that you actually just pick it up and use most of that time in class to actually focus on the lessons itself and any points regarding the meaning or the grammatical components of that particular chapter that we were covering. Oh, can you guys hear and see me? It says over here that my internet is unstable. I don't know if that's true and what effects that's having. Can you guys hear me,
Can
see me?
can hear you very well.
Perfect. At any point that it cuts off, I'll just relog, inshallah, with my phone internet. Let's go further. Without any further, let's go to lesson number 17. So in the Arabic language, every verb and every word actually has root letters in it, right? And then this idea, the words having root letters, means that, well, if now all of a sudden uh, 2 words had the same root letter and they have a very similar so they have a very similar root meaning as well, right? Um, um, it goes further where some Arabic adibs, really, the people who have studied the Arabic language and are proficient in it, right? Some adibs would come and say that if 2 words share 2 root letters, then they share a similarity in meaning as well, right? So they go as far as to say that if there's 2 words, both of them have 3 root letters, but the fa'ul fail and the lamul fail, or the fa'ul fail and the lamul fail are similar for both of these words, and in meaning as well, they have some sort of similarity to them, right? Um, if going further, then they would come and say that uh, if if the if the words are similar, they have similarity to them, and some dictionaries were written in this particular regard. For example, Kitab at-Tahqiq is a lexicon book which was written. Marhum Mustafawi wrote that, and here he brings about this particular view of his, really, which is quite popular among some of the popular among some of the adibs. Then if multiple letters were shared in a word, then perhaps that meaning would be very similar. Then he brings about certain words and says, well, what is the difference now between this word and that word? And why are they not the exact same? What the difference between them is, and so on and so forth. Quite interesting. And not every scholar of Arabic shares this opinion, but it is a popular opinion out there. And for the proponents of it, they can bring multiple examples where it does hold true and show that in the lexicon itself. Just a point to mention here. Today, what we're looking at is we're looking at root letter words that have one of the root letters uh, uh, continued, meaning one of the root letters um, one of the root letters basically doubles up. So in this particular case, if you look at it, the Ainul Fail and the Lamul Fail continues. So the Ainul Fail and the Lamul Fail basically repeats itself. So the Dal here, so the Madada is the actual word, that Dal repeats itself. The repetition of the dal could be now written out if, depending on which conjugation we're looking at in a particular manner. So, for example, madda, madda, maddu, maddat, maddata, madadna. Up until this third person feminine form, the dal is smushed together. And when it's smushed together, rules of idgham are applied, and you see a tashdid on top of the dal. Okay. And then after that, the idgham opens up. This opening up of the idgham in the Arabic language is called fakkul idgham, where basically the idgham literally splits apart, opens up, right? And that's what that word means. That the idgham has opened up. Madadna, madadta, madadtuma, madadtum, madadti, madadtuma, madadtunna, madadtu. And as I told you before, the dual doesn't really exist, so it becomes madadna at the end. For the first person, there's only the singular and the plural. This is the conjugation for madada in the past. In a very similar manner, there's a list of vocab at the end of this chapter. I highly encourage you to go through that list and at least take two or three other verbs and bring them into the Madi and write them down really and see the pattern that they follow and become really familiar with this. I encourage you to choose verbs which are found in the Holy Quran. How can you do that? You can go to um, Quran corpus, or you can search any other phonetic search of the Holy Quran and try to see if those verbs in the vocabulary that are shared with you, if they exist in the Holy Quran, and if they do, then there you go. Use that particular word. It's better to use that word than another word that might not necessarily come about in the Holy Quran. Okay. Hopefully, most of the words that are being introduced in this text are the ones that are very closely linked to your understanding of the Holy Quran and the Hadith. This is extremely important. Okay, I brought two examples here from your text. So if you look at it, verse number 3 of Surah 13, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وهو الذي مد الأرض, and it is he who has spread out the earth. So here, madda means to spread out. Okay, to extend, as it says over here. Okay. Um, uh, if you remember when you're in your tajweed classes and a mad comes, what do you do in the mad sound? You extend the sound, right? Mad literally means the extension of something. So huwa alladhi madda al-arda means that he extended the earth. Okay? This is unique and interesting here that the verse is saying that, because to extend something, you must have it that you then extend it. So over here, a secondary characteristic regarding the creation of the earth is mentioned, that it's not just the fact that it was created, Rather, its creation was unique in the sense that it was also extended, right? So, regarding the creation of the earth, al-ard, a secondary point is mentioned in this particular verse by this usage of the word madda, right? But one time I can tell you that I created basically a globe, right? A sphere, right? Another time I can tell you that actually I created um, uh, something and then extended it into the sphere, right? They're two very different things. In the second particular way, I'm telling you about the manner of creation as well as just the creation, right? So this particular verse talks about the manner of creation of this al-ard rather than just the simple creation of it. Let's look at the next. Let's look at the next verse, and I'm trying to get you guys to kind of taste uh, the the knowledge you have you can gain access to once you appreciate the different components and concepts we've learned together in this unit. So when you look at this particular verse now, you know madda means to extend, and then therefore you could have reached that conclusion that this secondary level of explanation is being given regarding the earth's creation. It's not just about the creation of the earth, but rather also about the extension of it. So the manner of creation is also emphasized here. When we look at verse number 164 in chapter number 3, we can also see لقد من لقد من الله على المؤمنين. The word here is manna. Manna, in many of the Eastern languages like Persian and Urdu and Hindi and so on and so forth, a very similar word called minnat is there. Minnat. It originates from this concept in Arabic, manna. Basically, it is um to bestow favor upon somebody, such that basically they weren't necessarily deserving of it, right? But you out of your generosity and grandness bestowed this favor upon them, right? And in bestowing this favor upon them, you actually hold a right on them now that you granted, you extended your arm and gave them something which was beyond their worth, really. So, for example, in Ziyarat Jamia Kabira, there's a line near the end of it that says, وَمَنَّ عَلَيْنَا بِكُمْ, right? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're talking to the Imam himself, is saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed this great favor upon us by means of you, by allowing us to be under the wilaya of you, by allowing us to understand your existence and be those who follow this existence and look forward towards being under the guardianship of this existence of yours. Right? So, وَمَنَّ عَلَيْنَا بِكُمْ. By allowing us to be in this particular state, Allah has in fact given us a great favor. In a very similar manner, over here, the verse is indicating, لَقَدْ مَنَّ اللَّهُ عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. Indeed, Allah did a great favor for the believers. Okay. So in this particular case, the word manna is the shahid misal, and this noon is doubled up, if you will, right? And in the doubling of the noon, the word becomes a fi'l al-mudaf, manna. So if you were to take manna into this, it would become manna, manna, mannu, mannat, mannata, mananna. See that? And near the end, there'll be three noons there. Mananna, right? So, in a very similar manner, go all the way to the end and please conjugate for yourself both madda, which is shown here, and manna as well. And there's a few other words at the end of the chapter if you have the book. Please use that. If you don't have the book, I'll post a PDF of the few chapters that are missing in the other texts shortly after class. Okay. فعل المضارع فعل المضاف in its مضارع format also occurs, and when it occurs, again, this table here shows you how it occurs. So, for example, in the مضارع aspect, if the rough state was to be seen as the first stage over here, if this particular column, if you will, right, this is the alamat al-raf, which is the dhamma, and you can see that these words that are brought here, they look very similar. So it's yamuddu, and then the other the feminine form is mentioned, tamuddu, right? And tumuddina. This over here, tumuddina, it's a sukoon, right? Umuddu, and then so on and so forth. Okay. In a very similar manner, when the mansub, so there's a 14 conjugation that's taking place. They're only giving the first one of them. So please be aware of that, and please make sure that you are able to conjugate in appropriately all of the raf for madda, right? And in a similar manner, mansub. So when lan came upon it, k could have come, an, lan, k, or idhan could have come on top. Really, we've covered this in the previous chapter to allow for the mudhari to become mansub, right? And then when it becomes mansub, we say lan tamudda. لن تمده, right? All the way down. Again, the 14 conjugation should be there. Please go through the verbs for yourself and make sure that you're able to conjugate them appropriately. If you're not able to, privately message me so that I can appropriately help you with those places where you're stuck. Okay. Perhaps I might even upload some charts which have them conjugated for you guys to better help you. Let me see if I could find those from my notes, and if I can find them, I'll upload them for you as pictures as well on the group. Then we have the majzum, the jasiv sound, the jasiv tense. Lam tamdud, lam tamdud. Right? If you see all the way down again, all the 14 will be present here, in a very similar manner to the previous two, right? And what's missing? What's not over here? What's missing over here? Well, the kathra doesn't exist for the fi'l, right? There's no such thing as a maksur fi'l, so it's not even mentioned over here. Okay. But there is a little mix up in your text, if you will. There are some examples of a subject and object that are being given, which are mudaf as well, but those are not fi'lul mudaf. Those are ismul mudaf. So that those examples that are there in your text for that regarding the subject and the object don't actually belong in this chapter, if this chapter is called fi'lul mudaf. Okay, and they're belonging to a chapter perhaps which is called Ismul Mudha'af, but somehow either the chapter of this title in this book should be changed to just Mudha'af, right, and not specific to the fail, in which case then you can bring those examples in as well, right? Or it should be a separate chapter regarding those to tell you about how those mudha'af work there, because mudha'af in the asma are different. For example, how the mudha'af looks like when there's 4 letters or when there's 5 letters is slightly different than when it's 3 letters, right? So it's important to understand and appreciate that. I think there's a slight error in the text when they've brought that in. Um, so perhaps if I was to create this text, I would separate the two examples regarding the subject and object into a separate unit altogether called Ismul Mudaf, right? Or I would give this particular chapter a title of Al Mudaf, where I would break it down into Fi'l al Mudaf and Asma al Mudaf and explain to you the difference between the two and how they appear. For the brevity of this level of the course, I think sticking to just the فعل المضاف is sufficient while getting a familiarity that in the asma, in the nouns, mudaf do exist, and perhaps in some cases their appearance could be slightly different depending on if they are 3-letter verb, 3-letter nouns, or 4-letter nouns, or 5-letter nouns. Right? Okay. So if you look at some of the examples here, go ahead, Sister Samina, raise your hand.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
In your last recording,
Yeah.
the lesson 16 audio was not there.
Okay. I'm not sure why we recorded the audio, and
No, did anyone else hear it? I heard the whole thing. The slide, only one slide was visible, and in your other slides there are two slides you made from lesson 16. So there was only one slide available, and there was no audio for the lesson 16.
okay. So I don't understand why, because we maybe the administration can help us regarding that, because we recorded it. The chap we had slight technical difficulty near the last 2 minutes, I think. But other than that, the full hour was recorded, and I think it was uploaded as well. Um, we can reconfirm from the administration what's happened. Maybe there's a technical issue that took place. But thank you for
Okay.
bringing it up. If you need any assistance from that particular chapter, and you have examples that you want to go over, please message me, and I'll help you out. One of you guys, I can't remember who, did message me a question, but when I read it, it wasn't really a question. Feels like more like a statement. So then I messaged back saying that, could you please clarify what the question is, so that hopefully I can better understand where the help is required. So please do feel free to ask questions. You can privately message me on WhatsApp, and I can, as best as I can get a chance, I'll respond to you, inshallah, and assist you with that. Um, so if there is any questions, is there something that you have from chapter number 16, please feel free to shoot me an email, either an audio, or type up the message and tell me exactly where the question is. And please note that my page numbers are different than your page numbers. So if you stick to the page numbers that are in the PDF that's shared on the group, that's probably the most ideal one, because that's the page numbers that I'm going off of. So if you're quoting page numbers and you want to go and you want to quote them from the PDF that is shared on the group, that would be ideal. Basically, that will assist me a lot, because then we can be on the same page. So if someone quotes, let's say, page 149, then we'll be all both we'll be on the same page, for example. Right? Otherwise, I wouldn't know exactly what that page is in your text, because I don't have that particular publication for that text. Um,
Thank you.
did that help you? Okay, alhamdulillah.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. So over here in Fi'l Mudaf in chapter number 17, the book extensively goes towards now showing you that, look, Fi'l Mudaf could be of multiple types. It could have raf state, it could have nasb state, it could have jazm state, right? It could have a madi majhul, it could have mudari majhul, and so on and so forth. Long story short, it is a type of verb, and just like how every other verb had the different conjugations that we've studied so far, this one has them as well, right? So unless there is a specific fi'l which we come across and we say that the Arabs only have a madi for this but no mudari, which is very rare, right? I can't think of one off the top of my head. That's how rare it is, right? Um, but I know that such a concept does exist in amongst Arabs, where it might be the case that certain verbs are exceptional verbs and so on and so forth. But other than that, almost all verbs will follow through with the conjugation that we've had. So this chapter basically takes you through the things that you already know, right? So in this particular case, here are the examples of mudari, fi'l mudaf, ending in a raf state. So now this idea of where it says ends with a dhamma, ends with a fatha, I think that because we've already covered this idea of what a raf is, what is nasb, and what is jazm, the book would have been better to come and bring those terminology here instead of just a dhamma, because we know, for example, in certain cases, it's not always the case that the fatha is the only alamat of a nasb. Sometimes the taking away of the noon becomes the alamat of the nasb, for example. Okay, so um, again, stating it is just ending with the fatha and ending with the dhamma and ending with the sukoon. Um, Perhaps there was a better way of displaying this. Having said that, um, there is this concept in mudaf where certain conjugations of the mudaf in amr, if I'm not mistaken, have multiple possibilities within it, associated with it. So in the text, in the table that I'll be posting on the group after the session, it will have that for you, inshallah. Your text did not have those possibilities explicitly being mentioned in it. But I feel that if you're going through the Holy Quran, you might come across different appearances of that. At the very least, you should be familiar that such a thing exists. Okay. In a very similar manner, again, we have the imperative, the amr, and then the nahi here as well, the prohibition, right? And again, the conjugations that are shown in this text too, right? As if you look at this item number 4, examples of the imperative verb, uh, وَاشْدُدْ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ, and harden their hearts. So what's the shahid misal here? Will be washdud. And why? Because well, the dal is repeated twice, right? And the way that it's brought here over here, the dal does not have a izgham. So you have to see which form of which sorry, from this table over here, which form does it fall into such that the idgham is not there, and so on and so forth. The table was for Madi, but the similar table for Fil Amr should be created by us as well, right? And I told you that I'll share those tables with you at the end of the session, so you'll have them on the WhatsApp group, inshallah. Um, at this point, before we continue further, I did receive a message from the administration to encourage that after Maha Ramadan, Shahr Ramadan, uh, um, they they would like you guys to continue with Arabic level 9 if you wish to, and please sign up for that. And this slight break in the middle is a reminder for you guys to appreciate that the learning of the Arabic language. Hopefully, use that in your recitation of the Holy Quran, and understand the words and the verses of the Holy Quran better, right? And it's a slow process, but this process is something that is important to stick to. So even though, for example, every level you're covering only certain topics, but it's important to stick through till the end, and that way you've covered in a wholesome manner at least a certain level of caliber when it comes to the Arabic grammar and Arabic morphology and so sarf and nahv basically. And hopefully the methodologies of teaching certain points regarding certain verses and certain exceptional verbs could be presented too, such that it kind of opens up your understanding of those verses and other verses that include those words or those particular appearances, as you've done so in the past few sessions as well. So again, it's a personal invitation for you guys to continue learning Arabic with whomever you may be learning level 9 with. It's extremely important that you continue the Holy Quran not through the lens of the translator, but rather through your own understanding of that particular language. This is extremely important. We mentioned multiple times so far that the translation is the word of the translator, while the Arabic is the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And to be able to access the word of Allah directly is extremely important. Okay. Okay. وَاشْتُدْ عَلَى قُلُوبِهِمْ. Okay. And harden their hearts. Okay. Um, the Nahi example is وَلَا تَمُدَّنَّ عَيْنَيْكَ. Strain not your eyes, right? So don't strain, don't extend, don't stress your eyes, basically. So again, if you look at this, tamadunna, madda is being used. Madda means to stretch and to extend, and the translation is strain. Over here, basically, don't do this. You see, when you go like this, you're extending your eyes slightly, right? So don't extend your eyes. So over here, you get a better meaning of what is being meant, right? So it's not just strain. Strain doesn't necessarily really the same meaning to you, but tamuddanna, where you understand that the meaning of extension, what it means, well, that gives a more a holistic meaning for you as somebody who's linking yourself to correctly the Arabic and the meaning behind that. rather than depending on the translation that somebody else has come and done for you, right? Here's just one example of that, for example. So the point number 6 says what? Examples of past and present passive verbs. So majhul, when we talked about af'al al-majhul, this is what it's talking about. وَلَئِنْ رُدِدْتُ إِلَى رَبِّي. So even if I am brought back to my Lord. So again, we understand through fi'l majhul that the fi'l itself is important, not the fa'il of it, and hence the majhul tense is brought forth. So there's an emphasis on the action of that's being mentioned. So rudidtu. So the person is saying, even if I am brought back to my Lord, with the emphasis on this idea that doesn't matter who brings me back, this idea of bringing back is what's important. Right, over here, this is what the highlighted portion is. I highly recommend you look at the full verses as well. I went and saw some of these verses. They're very beautiful verses that when you look at the full verses, you appreciate not only just the specific grammatical point that is encapsulated in these few words here, but you appreciate the vaster meaning behind the verse, and you can associate that meaning with now your understanding of the words that are there in that sentence. That's extremely important. So try not to stick to just the words that are present from the verses in this book of yours. Sometimes they shorten and do taqti', meaning to cut a verse and bring only a portion of it. And go see the full verse as well and appreciate that. If you can't do that for every example, at least make it a habit to do it for one or two examples. And you'll notice that a lot of the things you've covered already and your interaction with that verse, inshallah, will be significantly more than just an interaction with the translation, which is extremely important. How am I doing for time? Okay, I think I'm at the halfway mark almost, which is important because the next portion is extremely important to me. Every chapter and every unit that I teach in my teachings, I always try to ensure that at the end of every section or session, that we have something called a holistic review. The holistic review, the purpose of it is to encourage you to re-glance or glance again, rather, at what what we've covered so far. A. B is to allow you to create for yourself the capacity for summarized notes. Okay. You already have the full text, but if you were to go and review, let's say, such that you want these rules and things that we've covered so far to be in the forefront memory, rereading the text doesn't serve that purpose. It takes a long time, and we seldom have time to do that. So one method of doing that would be, for example, what I've done here. You take the lesson number and you take some major concepts that are covered in that particular lesson and you bring them here, and then you can attach to each one of these little blurbs any main point that comes to your mind. So if you go through the chapter number 6 and you come across any point that is mentioned over there that you thought was unique or interesting or something that you didn't necessarily remember or recall, right? You can just add that point in a bubble or linked format to something like this. And then in one page or perhaps 2 pages, you should have now a summary of the units you've covered from chapter number 6 all the way to chapter number 17. Okay. What that will do is it will not have all the details of everything you've covered so far, no, but it will have the major points, right? So when you're reviewing, let's say you're going to bed, and before you go to bed, you take 5 to 10 minutes to review this particular concept. You can review from chapter 6 to chapter number 17, and at least the major points in a quickened manner, right? And by doing so, you're basically allowing for yourself the capacity that once you understand that, if you know lan, hatta, an, kay, li, these are linked with huruf al-nasiba, that when you're reading the Holy Quran next, right? Because you know the theory, it can be brought to your forefront of your memory much quicker. And then you can recognize it quicker in the Holy Quran and the text that you're dealing with as well. This is the actual goal of you studying Arabic right now. None of us are studying Arabic just for the sake of studying Arabic. We're studying Arabic for the sake of being able to interact with and apply it to the Holy Quran. So one of the methods that assist us would be to create this summary of the concepts we've studied so far and bring the major points. I haven't brought any major points here. I've just shown you slight titles and any charts which I thought were interesting. But for example, chapter number 13, I added these two concepts of lazim and muta'addi, which was there, right? Now I just brought them in. You can now come and say, okay, perhaps there was another point that was mentioned somewhere else. Let me bring that point in. Okay. For example, id and idha. When does the meaning go to the past? When does the meaning go towards the present? Right. So bringing these points in is extremely important. If you bring the major points that you didn't remember when you did your recall, as you're reading through the chapters once, you didn't remember, you were like, oh, I forgot about this point. I didn't actually recall this point as easily. Bring those points specifically in so that when you're doing your recap or review, those points become at the forefront of your memory and you overall become more familiar with the content and concept. This method of review is extremely important. When you're doing Arabic, if you're doing Arabic for multiple years or multiple terms and so on and so forth, for example, if you remember what you studied in level one, all the way till now, if you remember it, well, it's slightly difficult to say you'll remember unless you have some sort of a summarized flow chart that you have a methodological approach of reviewing. So imagine, for example, you're in unit level number 8, right? Imagine that for each level you only had about 1 page or 2 page of summarized notes, like this, where it was like a mind map, if you will. And you can use softwares like Xmind, if you will, or if you don't want to do that, you can just hand draw them as well, right? Imagine you had only 1 page or 2 page summary of the key points covered in the various chapters that you have covered in the past, right? So when reviewing that, so let's say before you go into lesson number 9, level number 9, for example, after Shahr Ramadan, right? You would be if you were able to review from level number 1 all the way to level number 8. So that would be only about 8 to 16 max pages of review, right? And you just be glancing them over, and if you've been doing them enough times, even one quick glance might be sufficient to recall a lot of the concepts that were taught, right? What would happen then is as you're progressing, you're also solidifying previous understandings. This is extremely important. Otherwise, what ends up happening for Arabic students is that as they're going towards lesson number 14, they're forgetting lesson number 6 and 7. As they're going towards lesson number 15 and 16, they're forgetting what they studied in lesson number 8 or 9. But this larger, bigger picture, once it's drawn upon in a map form like this, you can retain it much more. So I specifically want to make sure that I had time to go over this particular method of recall when it comes to the Arabic language and the concepts covered. Because if you don't have this, then unfortunately, sometimes you could be going through too many classes, but not necessarily retaining that information. Okay. Which is basically a big problem because the reason for going to this class is not to get a degree or a certificate at the end, it's to actually be able to retain it and apply it. This is one of those sciences where the application and the capacity to apply it matters a lot. It's significant. It's part and parcel of why we're learning the science. So just as a quick recap, we started the journey with myself in lesson number 8, in level number 8, sorry, from lesson number 6. We talked about huruf al-jazm. And we said huruf al-jazm are those huruf which come about on fi'l al-mudari and they create a particular effect at the end of the fi'l, right? They take it out of the halat al-rafa and they put it into the halat of jazm. And there were different alamat for that. Conjugation number 6 and conjugation number 12, the noon we recognize were not the alamat of raf, and therefore it didn't go away, right? It was the alamat of ta'nith, the feminine form. We continued after lesson number 6, lesson number 7, where we looked at another aspect, another type of i'rab really for the mudari, which was huruf al-nasiba. These amils, these huruf came about on fi'l al-mudari, and then they changed the mudari from marfu to mansub. In a very similar manner, conjugation number 6 and conjugation number 12, the noon did not disappear because the noon was not part of alamat of raf. Rather, the noon was alamat of ta'nith there as well. Okay. You also went through the meanings behind every one of them, and where they're used, and the examples were given from the Holy Quran. But those are details. We're looking at a larger step back, bigger picture review right now. Okay. Then lesson number 8, we looked at laysa and what laysa meant and how it showed up in the sentences, and what effects did it have, right? Then we went to lesson number 9 where we looked at huruf al-shart, and we said, well, these huruf can come about. They're actually linked to lesson number 6, where actually the in that was mentioned, these are akhawat, these are the sisters of that in that was mentioned up here, right? Right over here where in came about, these huruf al-shart came about on two verbs and would end up making both of them majzum. We also saw examples where one of the verbs was perhaps sometimes hidden. It wasn't explicitly mentioned, but it was there, right? In the meaning, right? And so you saw some of those in your examples that were in that chapter near the end, if I'm not mistaken. If my recall is correct, right? And then again, this was linked to this idea of the mudari becoming majzum, right? So in this case, two mudaris will become majzum. Over here, I told you guys that there are multiple more verbs, more amils than the ones present in this book. Just keep that in mind. And I read off the list to you as well, um, just so you have an idea of what verbs, what amils are there, which can create this halat of jazm for multiple mudaris. Okay. Lesson number 10 talked about ism al-fa'il and ism maf'ul, and we looked at the conjugation of the two. And I also talked about certain type of asma, like qatil, like fa'il, where in terms of its contextual meaning, could mean fa'il or maf'ul. Qatilul abarat it means maqtul, right? The maqtul of abarat, for example. So we talked about certain nuanced meanings there as well, right? We continue on to lesson number 11. Somebody have a question? Anybody have a question? Oh, okay. Oops. Oops. We continued from lesson number 11 to Jumlatul Fi'liya, and we talked about the meaning behind Jumlatul Fi'liya. And when Jumlatul Fi'liya is used, it's talking about an action that is a phenomenon. It's not something that is absolute in its existence. Rather, it is an occurrence, so it has a start and a finish, and so on and so forth, which is very different than the Jumla Ismiya being used. Okay. And we talked about some nuanced understanding of the meaning behind some of the verses that were used in that chapter as well. We continue to chapter number 12. We talked about idh and idha. Idh and idha, where in idh and idha, some of them were taking the meaning towards the past, while others were maintaining them in the present. And the different examples of that were shared with you in the text. Please, if you're writing a brain map or mind map, add those here and see what is the difference in id and idha and how does that. So Samina, go ahead.
Sorry, I came across a question in lesson 11.
Okay, go ahead.
So it says nouns which appear to be feminine preceded by a singular verb. So this is the ta marbuta example of Surah Hud and ayat number 67 and ayat number 94. The mighty blast did seize the wrongdoers. وَأَخَذَ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا الصَّيْحَةُ. And the other one is وَأَخَذَتِ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا الصَّيْحَةُ. So the one is a story of Salihan and the other is the story of Shoiban. So do you know why this is one is masculine and the other is feminine?
Yeah.
Do you
Surah
have
Hud,
any
verse number
idea?
what? I just pulled the surah. Can you tell me which verse it is?
67.
67. Yeah.
So the
So أعوذ بالله من
وَأَخَذَ.
الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله
Yeah.
الرحمن الرحيم وأخذ الذين ظلموا صيحة فأصبحوا في ديارهم جاثمين. That's verse 67 of
Yes.
Surah Hud. So what's the question here?
So this verb is masculine.
وأخذ.
Yes.
Yes, yes. So it's masculine because it's linked to الذين, right? It's وأخذ الذين ظلموا صيحة فأصبحوا في ديارهم جاثمين. So over here it has to be brought as a masculine form. Is there a reason why you're saying that it should be in its feminine form? Or is that what you're saying? Again, I'm not sure what the question is.
So,
Could you please repeat your question? Can you guys hear me? Uh-oh.
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah.
oh,
Could you
so the
repeat your question,
first,
sister?
yeah, the first Surah Hud, ayat number 67, and Surah
Mm-hmm.
Hud, ayat number 94.
Okay.
So, so ayat number 94 has feminine,
Mm-hmm.
and the author is saying that sayhatu has ta marbuta, so masculine or feminine verb can be used.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. But do
So
you have
so
any idea why the story of Salihan is using masculine verb and the story of Shoiban is using feminine verb?
So when we're looking at the Holy Quran and we're looking at it, whenever we have multiple possibilities from a grammatical standpoint, and one particular uh, um, um, conjugation is used in the Holy Quran, it goes back to one of the sciences of balagha. So, for example, one of the sciences of balagha is called badi'. Badi' means basically the science which links to the sounds. If you, for example, notice when you're reciting the Holy Quran, like for example, when you're reciting Surah Maryam or other surahs, every surah has a particular harmonic sound in it too. That if you were to listen to the recitation of it, the way the words are structured and how they are structured in a particular way and they end in a particular way. So to stick to the harmony of speech, the eloquent speech in Arabic is one that has this vocal or colloquial harmony to it too, right? Where the sounds of the sentence structures meet a certain pattern as well. Options are there, one particular might be chosen because it goes back to the sound of that particular verse being in line with the sounds that are before or after that particular verse, sticking to the harmony of that surah. That's why when basically the melody of the surah was talked about in the past, we had the mushrikeen say to the non-believers, please put cotton in your ears because if the melody of this book reaches your ears, it will captivate you. And that's because the way the Arabic is in the Holy Quran, if it's recited appropriately, it is quite captivating for the Arab native listener. Where it actually not only is the meaning something that is profound, but rather the form in which the meaning is conveyed is also which is something which is profound. And this is the miraculous nature of the Holy Quran, for example. Okay. So in this particular case, both options are available, right? One is chosen over the other, and the reason of it could go towards the science of badi'. Okay. Another reason could be the science of al-ma'ani. So in the science of al-ma'ani, this what happens in this science is that it talks about if you have multiple options present to you, and the baligh speaker, the speaker who is um, um, eloquent in their speech, chooses one over the other, then there's also perhaps a meaning link as well, right? Um, and so on and so forth. In this particular case, I think the it's true to say that there's a badia link more than the ma'ani link. I don't see a ma'ani link here between these two verses. Okay, but I could be wrong. I'm just giving you a cursory understanding of when I just look at the two verses and comparing them right now in front of you. I don't see a link to the ma'ani science, but rather I do see one to the badia science in terms of the harmony of how the words are recited. Did that answer your question, Sister Samina?
Yes, and Allah has put the verb is followed by the object and then the subjects. It's not a normal way of in the Quran.
Yeah. So this idea where basically the appearance of the subject and the object are flipped to a normal method of speaking, right? This links to the science of ma'ani, where this actually has meaning behind it. So this doesn't have anything to do with the usage of the masculine or the feminine. This has to do with the bringing about of the subject and the object in a particular order, right? So the change of order, for sure, that we've covered before in our sessions, that is linked to the science of al-ma'ani in balagha, in eloquence. Balagha itself has three sciences within it. One of them is ma'ani, which links with the meanings of certain certain ways of saying things. For example, when I say let's hit the road, I don't mean let's take a stick and whack the road. What I mean to say is let's go, right? So let's hit the road has a particular connotation in terms of meaning behind it, which a native speaker would understand. So examples like that are covered in the science called al-ma'ani, right? In a very similar manner, when I say إياك نعبد as opposed to نعبد إياك, right? In terms of the meaning, there's a hasr that is understood. Hasr meaning that only comes in translation, basically. Then only do you do you who I worship. I only worship you, for example, right? Or I only seek help from you. إياك نستعين, as opposed to saying nasta'inu iyak, right? Or so like for them saying that something like I seek help, you're one of the people I seek help from, right? When I flip them, when I change the order up, right? When I change the order up, I'm actually giving the meaning that only from you am I seeking help, and only do you I worship. Okay.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
no problem. We have about 5 minutes left. I just want to quickly go and finish up the 3 or 4 sessions as a review. So at least in class time, we've gone through some of them, and then we'll end the session for today and the level for today as well. And I highly encourage you guys to continue with level 9, inshallah, to further strengthen your Arabic capacities. Okay. We covered then lesson number 13 talked about the passive sense, majhul, madi majhul, right? So lesson 13 and 14 were talking about majhul. One was about madi, the other was about mudari, right? So we talked about this idea that the action is important, not the actor. And we talked about what the naib fa'il is over here. Naib fa'il was something that was coming and replacing the fa'il because the fa'il was no longer mentioned anymore, right? And then we talked about verbs that are muta'addi and verbs that are lazim, that require an object that don't require an object. And majhul was created for those verbs that require an object, right? And then the object would turn into a naib fa'il. It would come and be now called for fi'l majhul a naib fa'il. It won't be called an object anymore. It wouldn't be called a maf'ul. It'd be called a naib fa'il. That's the correct istilah, correct verb and terminology for that. Maf'ul, when the fi'l has become majhul. Okay. So chapter 13 and 14 talked about mudari majhul and madi majhul. Then we went further and talked about ta'kid or lam wa nun tawkid. We talked about this idea that ta'kid or tawkid, depending on what you intend to say, they basically emphasize the union of two things. They don't add meaning except that they highlight a pre-existing meaning to them, right? And then we gave examples there of where Noon Tawqid comes in. We gave certain examples where only Lam comes in, right? And if you want, you can go to Khutbah Shakia of Nahjul Balagha. In the first sentence, you can see about 7 or 8 ta'keeds there, right? Which is very interesting. That many ta'keeds are there in one particular sentence. Then you go further into lesson number 16, Ism Tafdil, and we talked about the idea that we have a comparative sense to it and a superlative sense to it, right? Af'al al-ta'in and af'al al-tabdil. Af'al al-ta'in meaning when I say Allahu Akbar, I don't mean to say that there are other things and then Allah is greater than them in the comparative sense. No, I mean to say af'al al-ta'in here, meaning that it's a superlative sense, meaning there is nothing comparable for it to be Akbar. Allah is the greatest in the meaning that there is none other who have greatness to them but Him. Right? So this superlative form takes a slightly different meaning than the comparative form. We covered and talked about those two. And then today's session, we talked about this idea of fi'l al-mudha'af. We talked about the idea where certain verbs in the Arabic language, they have a repeated word to them, and the conjugation of them then is slightly different. So today's lesson was more regarding morphology than nahw. Okay, that's more regarding sarf than it was about nahw. So this concludes a review of everything we've studied so far. Alhamdulillah, we have about a minute left. I highly recommend you guys that in this month of Sha'ban, which is passing by, have extra attention towards the Holy Prophet as is his month. We have in the ahadith where he says, "Help me, help you." And someone asks him, "How can we help you? And what are we helping you in?" He says, "Help me by prolonging your sujuds. When you go into sajda, help me, help you." How is the Holy Prophet helping us? Well, he's uplifting us, growing us, taking us away from hellfire, allowing for our sins to shed away, right? And creating this capacity in us to go to heaven, right? So how do we help him in creating that capacity for us? We extend our sajdas. That's one of the ahadith of the Holy Prophet talks about this effect of extending sajda. So in the few days that are left in this holy month, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if you have not forgiven us up until now, please, O Allah, forgive us in the few days that are left of this beautiful month of the Holy Prophet. And in our actions as well, we should try to extend our sajdas as a means of thanking the Holy Prophet. Right? We should help the Holy Prophet if we can't by means of fasting as he requested from us. At the very least, we can help him by extending our sajdas by a millisecond or two, a second or two, a minute or two, and so on and so forth, whatever our capacities without straining ourselves. Right? Extending of our sajda for the sake of helping the Holy Prophet help us really. How are we helping him? We're helping him in helping us achieve a closer station to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This concludes the session for today. Sallallahu Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjal farajan wa farajan wa iyyak.
Thank you so much.
At your service, inshallah.
Ma'azur Sheikhna, thank you very much.
Thank you
Yeah,
very
alhamdulillah.
much. Thank you.
My sincere apologies for not being able to attend most of the classes. Inshallah, I will do my best for the subsequent sessions if I am to join to be able to attend. But I really, really appreciated all the efforts and mashallah, the insights and the additional tips that you brought forth for us. And inshallah, we will keep on learning. Jazakumullah khair.
Alhamdulillah.